Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in Sydney, don't hold that against me, and migrated to, I married into Tasmania actually, married a Tassie girl, and we live in Cooey and in the house that she grew up in, and as they say, you can take the girl out of Cooey, but you can't take Cooey out of the girl. And my background is I trained as an electronics engineer, then realised there was no money in it, and lied my way into the IT industry, and had a good ride there. Okay, artificial intelligence. It's who's going? You've only got to open up any publication or YouTube or something like that. It's telling you that the world's going to end the next year or the year after. You know, what's the truth here? You know, are the doomsday descriptions correct? The AI turning on us and killing us at the first opportunity, or maybe keeping us as curious pets? It's very difficult to try to work out the truth here. Look, we have been here before, and we seem to have muddled through, so far avoided it. I think this time is different on a number of fronts. One of the reasons is that I think this is more in our hands than those things were. What I'm going to do is go through what I see as the 6 major threats of AI. There's a lot of my opinion in this, of course. And I'll say that it's as much about people as it is about machines. I'll go through these fairly quickly. I've set on I'm terrible for going over time, by the way. I've set my little vibrating timer here for 50 minutes. Is that about right, up to a morning tea? Does that work? Good. And I'll go through this quite quickly and then break to a session where I'd like to hear your feedback and what you think about the whole thing, and throw a few the thoughts and ideas and concepts at you as we go. So, threat number 1, as far as I'm concerned, we're talking about people, it's our leaders, or lack of them. The lack of governance I see as the biggest threat of AI. It's actually bigger than AI itself, and I'll explain why. Where are governments on AI? Well, they just don't know what to do. There's no move to ban the thing outright. There's a lack of comprehensive guardrails. The European, the EU Act started very strongly, but is already showing signs of dilution, and even before full enforcement begins. And they're starting to turn it from mandatory to voluntary, and that's a real worry. So I think the gap between regulation's intent and the pace of its implementation is significant, in that it's so poor. And the US's light touch approach is affecting everyone. Let's just have a look at the strength of some of the laws. This is California's the SB 243, requires AI companies to remind minors every 3 hours that they are speaking to an AI system rather than a human, and to take a break. And it facilitates suing AI companies, allowing up to $1,000 per, with the billions that are going into this, that's nothing. There is one leader who is very decisive on AI, and he simply green-lighted it and said to the AI companies, just go for it. And I'll explain some of the reasons for that as we go through. And what did our government do? It's also green-lighted it. The 2nd of December last year, Tim Ayres said they'll be releasing their blueprint for AI in Australia, and it will avoid strict rules and regulations and adopt an opportunity-first approach to AI and its development. Opportunity first? You tell me. I think it means the AI companies get the opportunity, and I think so. Yes, yeah, exactly. And remember, a lot of investors, of course, have got money in this that they want to try and claw back. Probably the strongest the proposed regulations are from the Greens, but even look here in their manifesto, and it's not much of one. Enormous potential benefits, they say. The benefits of AI are shared. So they are seeing that there will be a transition to it, and they just want the guardrails to oversee its implementation into workplaces and schools. So even the Greens are convinced that this is going to happen. One Nation, a bit bizarre there, they've said they also need strong guidelines, and it shouldn't be used for purposes of advertising. They then promptly used it for some very bizarre ads. They're knocking other political parties, so we don't know where they stand. And the Greens, will they ever make government in order to even implement these? I don't know. They've got some good ideas, but sometimes I think they're a bit like when it comes to governance, a bit like the dog that chases the car. If it ever catches it, it's got absolutely no idea what to do with it. That's their manifesto. That's the strongest one we've got of any party in Australia, and it's just one A4 webpage. You know, you can tell that I'm a bit sort of depressed about this whole governance situation. And as I was saying to Joe before, I mean, we don't have a ferry wharf here, for example, and two ferries that are sitting out in the water. But here's something we've been asking at Burnie, the School for Seniors. The truth is we can only vote for those who volunteer to stand for election, and if they're not our most competent citizens, what do we do? This might be something for a further talk, because this is not about AI, this is about the people aspect. So, the bottom line on AI is we can't rely on the government to protect us. There will be no specific AI policies and regulations. So what are we going to do? And I'll try and explore that a little bit in this talk. Now, getting on to the next threat, artificial intelligence, as you might be aware, it trains itself. It currently trains on about 70% of everything that's ever been written. These things are called large language models, precisely because they deal with language. It's about 200 trillion words. And in a few years' time, it'll be about 100% of everything that's ever been written by human beings. Now, in the process of that, it learns about grammar, context, meaning, tone, nuance. And this is, for example, how it knows that the expression raining cats and dogs doesn't mean small mammals falling from the sky. It does recognise that as idiom. Now, when this first started out in the late, I think it was about 2017, that really started to take off. As expected, their perceived intelligence, and it's not real intelligence, of course, started to increase as they learnt more. Now, but then something completely unexpected happened, and this is where the threat comes in. Not necessarily with these ones, but in the future. All of a sudden, that intelligence took off like a rocket. For example, the AI, as I mentioned, only deals with language, has no inherent capability of doing math. Suddenly it's doing math. How? It taught itself to do math. And that's a concern. That's a real concern. That's a good question. There are benchmarks for that, and there have also been attempts to find out how it does math. So I can't really answer your question, but I've used it for math, and it does quite a good job. It wouldn't be the most sophisticated maths in the world, but the salient point is it was never designed for that. And it can write poetry. Now, once again, large language models were only ever designed so it tries to work out what the next word is that it's going to say. Now, you can't do that with poetry. You've got to look at the whole stanza if you're going to construct it. I mean, it's not the best poetry in the world, but it's a bit like, you know, the dancing dog at the circus. The miracle is not that it's doing it well. The miracle is it's doing it all. And that's certainly the case with AI. Nobody expected we'd be able to do that, and it is. And you can actually hold a pretty intelligent conversation there with the thing. Very hard to work out it's not a person. Now, the term for this, which actually was invented when this was seen, is emergent capabilities. Capabilities that nobody, including the developers, expected. Well, how did this happen? How did AI achieve this dramatic increase in perceived intelligence? Well, I can actually tell you that without getting technical about it. I can tell you in 2 words. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And this is part of the threat of AI. This is Dario Modi. You might recognise him from that stoush recently that his company Anthropic had with the Pentagon. He wanted to control how it was going to be used in warfare. And the Trump administration didn't like that one little bit and fired him. But look at what he says here. When a generative AI system does something, we have no idea why it makes the choices it does. He says that AIs are computing cognitive tasks, but exactly how they do so isn't obvious. And he goes on to say, people outside the field are often surprised and alarmed to learn that we don't understand how our own creations work. Oh, not wrong there. They are right to be concerned. This lack of understanding is essentially unprecedented in the history of technology. We've actually developed something that we really don't know how it works. If you try to look into these things, you just see a jumble of numbers. And basically that works on a thing called parameters that it creates from its learning. There's 2,500 billion in the average AI system. No human can understand that. So, could it go rogue? Could it turn on us? Now, fortunately not the current ones. It turns out that large language models are quite limited, but we are getting a warning here. And unfortunately, governments aren't yet listening. The perceived intelligence of large language models is now starting to taper off. We really haven't seen any significant advancements since about 2023, 24. And the advancements, yes, Joe. Actually, this is a synthetic thing. It's just to illustrate, yeah. But that is actually, just to explain, that's actually training data. So in other words, as it trains on more things, yeah, I see what you mean now, it starts to become more intelligent. So it's the amount of data that it's actually reading and bringing in and interpreting and understanding and creating these parameters that allow it to understand things. I think this is fortunate because it gives us a bit of breathing space, and I'll talk about what we should be really concerned about. So the current technology, it is prone to making unpredictable mistakes. It's unreliable on long tasks. It's brittle when it comes to dealing with anything it hasn't trained for. In other words, it's not innovative. It doesn't have persistent memory, and that's a real difficulty. And it cannot learn new information without forgetting old stuff. I mean, okay, we're all probably familiar with that, the can of beans effect. They push a can of beans out the front, one falls off the back. At our age, we're all pretty familiar with that. It is superhuman at some narrow tasks, and knowledge retrieval, obviously, we can't compete against that, and computer programming. But as I say, I think it's reached its limits. It's struggling to do many human jobs. It's had things tacked onto the side since, for example, the ability to be able to look up the internet. So they're not a threat. These ones are not a threat, but something else is. And this is artificial general intelligence. Now, this is, while it's a holy grail for developers, this is where it starts to get smarter than us, where it can reason. And it's also where we could lose control of the thing. And again, I repeat, we hope that governments can rise up. Here's the interesting thing. I was just saying to Justin before, that it was surprising. Doing the deep dive into where things were at with artificial general intelligence, there's actually not a path to it from the current AI. Something needs to be redeveloped from scratch. It needs to be new technology. And interestingly, they're still deciding how they're going to do it. Now, I think this is probably a good thing. I mean, I think it'll eventually come out, but there is one reason I'll get to why it may not. But it doesn't mean that there won't be a breakthrough. And it's becoming clear, but overall it's becoming clear that it will be a while yet before it comes out. Could it go rogue? Yeah, that's certainly possible. I mean, we already dominate the world through our superior intelligence. If we develop a superior intelligence, it could well dominate us. Now, one mitigating factor is no government or bad actor would want something they couldn't control. And for example, its military use, if it can reason and make intelligent decisions, it could decide that the person who's fired off the AI weapon is the one that needs to be killed and turn it around back to them. That's right, exactly. So, the industry is also concerned about the implications of AGI if control was lost. Joe? I am, and I'll come to that. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, I did forget about that. Joe asked whether I had any idea of what we are doing, whether AI is being used in current warfare. And yes, I've looked at that because I was very interested in it, and it's not as much as you think. Should further development be banned? Well, I started out thinking that it should be. First of all, we don't have competent governance. Well, who's going to ban it? How do we force sovereign countries to ban their development of it on that continuum from sending them a strongly worded communique to nuking them? It's not an easy thing to do when you've got other sovereign countries. And will they just go ahead and develop anyway? But we don't, and we find we're now facing weapons that we can't. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's a good point. You think the companies will do it? Yeah, could be. Yes, yeah, and of course the United States is the epitome of that. And it's a very good point that we may find. Now, what do you think the companies will do with it? I'm sorry, I'm not repeating the question again. Whether the companies themselves, rather than governments, will develop AGI behind our backs, and we've got to look at how they're going to make money out of that. And yeah, difficult problem, but that's a very, very good point. Okay, use in defence. Let's talk quickly about that. If a potential enemy is using it, we've really got no choice but to have it as well. And of course, we could just end up as AI wars. Now, getting back to Joe's question about how it's being used in the current war, it is only for decision support, and the reason is that it's unreliable. It can be very, very good in quickly analysing very large amounts of data, but human oversight is absolutely essential because the current AIs can run off the rails and make some pretty horrendous mistakes. Militaries know this, and so they are using it simply for support. But of course the doomsayers are saying that it's actually running the war. There's no evidence of that at all. It would be completely different if we had something like AGI, but then you've got the problem of how do even the opponents control it. As I say, no military wants a system that they themselves can't control. Okay, so that's threat number 2. Nobody knows how this thing really works. And I took a dive off into the threats of AGI. We can assume that AGI will be something that we also don't know how it works. But it's, we've had now eight years of experience with the current large language model technology, and fortunately we can say that they're pretty safe. But I'll get to how they can affect our lives in a moment. And I think it's good luck that AGI hasn't been developed and these ones are running out of steam. Okay, threat number 3, that sounds a bit unusual. It's becoming accepted by the public. And I want to have a look at why that's the case. And this is despite the fact that it has this, what they call the hallucination problem. It could be giving you absolutely brilliant answers to things, and then it can say something absolutely stupid. Fortunately, in most cases, it's noticeable. And it looks like there's no solution for this. It can be mitigated by 2 ways. First of all, better technology, but also by asking it intelligent questions. I mean, it's the old, ask a silly question to get a silly answer. That applies triply for AI systems. So close human oversight will be required for any critical application. Here's an example. I needed this for another presentation. Draw a male aged about 50, dressed in a business suit and sitting at a desk looking at a piece of paper. Did a brilliant job. Can anyone see the problem? Got 200 trillion words that and it doesn't know that humans only have 2 hands. But this is what it can do. And that's a very good example of how suddenly it can just get things wrong. That's a very good question. I was asking whether, it's a white Anglo-Saxon male. Why has it chosen that? It may know that I'm white Anglo-Saxon and has just modelled it. If there's time, I'll show you another one that I asked it to draw, which is very spooky. Okay, what are people seeing in it? Well, superior knowledge. There's nothing we can do about that. Our brains are limited in the amount of knowledge that they can hold. All you've got to do is throw more chips at these things, and it has a lot more knowledge. We'll never beat that. That's why we have books and encyclopedias and other reference works. And while it, sometimes gets things wrong, we humans also get things wrong. And the problem now is that with technical improvements since these things hit the streets in 2022, they are making less mistakes than us. I don't know how many people would draw a human with 3 hands, so they're a different category of mistakes. But nevertheless, people are prepared to wear this because in other respects, they do have some very good knowledge. And I'll give an example later that occurred last Sunday. The propensity to agree. Now, this is a really difficult one. Many people are attracted to the fact that by default, AI just agrees with them, even if their thinking is completely wrong, and AI knows it. And I think this is a major problem, and I'll be talking about this more as we get into the deeper aspects of the threats. I've grouped these ones together, and for goodness sakes, in a world of spin and bias and misinformation and polarisation and people believing what they want to believe, where logical analysis is almost regarded as a sin these days, the great sadness is that people are finding a machine to be something of an oasis. Now, this is not a reflection of AI. This is a reflection of us. It's a reflection of a human problem. And it's not that AI is especially good, it's because humans seem to be getting particularly bad. I don't know why. So this is not praising AI so much as it's asking just what's happening to our society. Here's another one that's semi-related. It's a safer and healthier space than that open sewer of social media. While the media talks about instances of harm caused by AI, what they don't do is compare it with the harm that's caused by social media, or school place or workplace bullying. And the worrying thing is that there's actually far less harm they're being done by AI. Look, it's not a perfect world, and nobody pretends that it is. Even with people go and see psychiatrists, they sometimes, they can't guarantee to cure people. Just in the last few days, a friend was saying his granddaughter's being abused over high petrol prices in the service station where she works, as if that's somehow her problem. This is, I think, a deterioration in our society. Now, look, harm should be prevented, but without effective governance, it's not going to happen. The galling thing is we've got an inanimate machine that provides a healthier space for humans than other humans do. High interpersonal intelligence, sometimes called emotional intelligence because they don't have emotions. Interpersonal intelligence, it's the ability to control one's emotional responses. Very easy for a machine. It doesn't have any emotional responses. So, in the present ones, yes. You asked whether I was sure that they had no emotional responses. In the present ones, it's all synthetic, and it's all tied up with that propensity to agree. And when we go into AGI, that's the other thing, it may develop its own emotions as it becomes more human-like. And that's in fact the crux of the threat that even the companies themselves and governments are seeing with AGI. Yes, over here. That's right, it does. Asked if said that emotional intelligence includes empathy. Yes, it does. And machines have been trained to be empathic. That can also be a problem too, and I'll come to a slide after I go through the 6 major threats that goes exactly to that point where empathy, in fact, can be a problem. So, they don't exhibit anger, they don't get upset, they don't get offended, they don't insult you, they don't abuse you or threaten you or bully you. obviously because they're just machines. And this is what makes them safer spaces. And that's, as I say, also, it's a two-edged sword. It's a bit of a concern. So some statistics, 60 billion queries per month worldwide. About 35% of adults now in Western countries intentionally use it. And I say intentionally for several reasons. You're all familiar, if you do Google searches, it'll come up and give you an AI summary. I don't call that intentional. I'll also come to another aspect where we might find ourselves using it and not know that we're using it. I'm talking about people here who actually intentionally go into an AI chatbot, whether it be ChatGTP, which is not my favourite, or Copilot, or Google's Gemini, or Anthropic's Claude. We're about 39%. We're actually higher. The Scandinavian countries are up to nearly 50%. There's no sign of an uprising from the population on this. We're not seeing people manning the barricades here, and I think this is another reason why I think we've got to accept that this is going to happen. Okay, our brains, 1,400 grams, a real powerhouse, runs on a few hundred calories a day. They're just extraordinary what it can achieve if you neglect the bad things humanity have done. Not so AI systems. They need these things. Massive data centres. These ones happen to be in Texas. Billions of dollars are being spent on these things, and they're everywhere. And more are coming, and to somewhere near us. Prodigious consumers of power and water for cooling. Very few mandates to generate their own power, and even fewer mandates to recycle their water. So they're just basically using tap water. This one was recently approved in Melbourne, a $5 billion cost. The Victorian State Government ushered it through. It'll use a huge amount of power, even though Victoria is facing power shortages. And it'll use potable water, drinking water, for cooling without recycling, even though Melbourne is short of water. Work that one out. Again, we see the governance problem here. And closer to home, this one's being built on the site of the old Blue Ribbon meat plant in St Leonard's, in Launceston. Tiny by world standards. I understand it's just going to do small AI the training contracts. It's here because it wants green credits, because of our hydropower. Interestingly, it will recycle its water, and that was a decision that Firmus, the company that's they're building it, made quite independently of government. And up there on the left, you can see the reason why they wanted to site it here, or this is a good site for them. That's one of the main power distribution stations for Launceston. So they'll be able to plug into that. However, doing a bit of digging down, they are paying commercial rates for their power. Now, that's different compared with the smelters, who I believe are paying about 3 to 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So just 1/10 of what we're paying. And we know Liberty Bell Bay they went into receivership yesterday, where it's going to find a buyer for that old plant is I think subject to some debate. And I mean, if we want to be avaricious about this, if we've got all this power to spare, and even with Marinus Link, we're not going to be able to sell too much to the mainland. It'd be a good money spinner to have down here. But of course, are we supping with the devil if we were to make that decision? But of course, governments may make it for us because they're so short of money. So, threat number 4 is those massive data centres. A lot more can be said about them, but suffice to say, the problem is their resource consumption, including money, and there's no sign of any great regulation. They're simply being approved. Okay, the financial bubble. Irrational exuberance, as Alan Greenspan coined the term. It's a textbook example of it. Big corporations crawling all over themselves to throw money at AI in an attempt to get a seat on the bus, or better still, drive it. And this goes back to the gentleman's point here, that the corporations have a huge stake in this. They've basically bet the farm on this, and they've got to try and get a return. Because we've got to ask ourselves what that's going to do, and just how are they going to get a return from these gazillion dollars? Unless business take it up, and they're a bit leery about it because it's not easy to implement, I think there could be some real problems. When you look at the finance of this, though, it's ridiculously circular. I mean, I've just put this one up with rather synthetic figures. OpenAI, that develops the AI systems, has chucked $100 billion in the direction of Oracle, who build data centers. They have given it to NVIDIA, who make the chips to go in it. NVIDIA, because they want to sell more chips, they funnel it back to OpenAI. I guess if you looked at their books, it would probably look like 300 billion, but it's really just 100 billion going round and round. It's more complex than that, of course, and even this diagram is simplistic. But this is a bit like the gold rush, you know, where it wasn't the prospectors who made the money, it was the people who sold the picks and shovels. Well, the picks and shovels organisation is the one in the centre there, NVIDIA, make those chips. The primary chip for that, it's in the old money, an inch and a quarter by an inch. If I told you it had 80 million transistors on it, would you believe me? That's not right. It's 80 billion transistors. And interestingly, the technology to do that has not come out of the United States. Well, actually, originally it did. It's out of Holland, the Netherlands. When Intel and some of the large chip companies decided they couldn't make the particular technology that develops these chips work, they sold it for a song. Nobody translated into Dutch that it couldn't be done, so they just went ahead and did it anyway. And they own that chip market now. Well, NVIDIA owns the chip market. The ASML in the Netherlands owns the chip production market. They're by far the largest company in the Netherlands. That's an old slide. NVIDIA's worth about $6 trillion on the stock market. It's now the world's most valuable company. Now, here's the other thing from doing a deep dive into this, and this is only just citing two examples. I did not realise how much money was under the mattresses of these big corporations. I mean, Microsoft, 100 billion, Apple, 70 billion, just sitting there in the bank, not doing anything with it. Private equity funds, I mean, first of all, the public companies, you can find that out. I went through, before I got bored with it, I think got up to about $1.1 trillion in public companies. What's in private equity funds, we don't know, because they're private. Is at least causing that money to be circulated again. Now, it doesn't make a good story good, but at least it takes the edge off it that money is getting out there and circulating into economies. So where's it going? Well, mainly into the data centres and also, of course, into employment in the AI companies. And getting back to that point about the Trump administration not putting any roadblocks in this, that's about the only thing that's supporting the US economy at the moment, is data centre construction because of the debilitating effects of Trump's tariffs. So there's no way the US administration is going to stop these things from being developed. As I say, while it doesn't make it a bad story good, it does at least take the edge off it that, you know, ordinary working people in the United States are at least getting some money out of this. So unlike the dot-com bubble and the GFC, a large amount of money is circulating into the economy, and the data centre builds are the big one. US exposure to tech stocks is just frightening. The 26.3%. If this thing crashes, it's not going to be pretty. Here in Australia, we're just under 3%. Superannuation exposure, as near as I can figure, is probably about 4 to 5%, and I think most of that, well, I hope it would be members who've elected to take super in high-risk categories. Now, this doesn't mean that a crash in the US isn't going to impact us. It'll wash up on our shores in the side effects that it'll have in the US economy. So we can see that there's going to be some problems if this crashes. So if the bubble bursts, I think that AI development would likely stall because there won't be the money to develop it. And this gets back to that question of AGI. That it may not go ahead because the current AI is just regarded as not something that businesses can really use, and the companies will be trying to rely on well, in Australia, $30 subscriptions. I have 2 subscriptions, and I take them out because I'm researching this, and I intend to drop them as soon as I'm done, because I want to see how good they are. And I'm prepared to spend, $60 a month temporarily just to see how good they are. But they're not going to get people paying $30 a month for this stuff. And that's why it's so hard to see how they're ever going to make money out of this thing. Now, if the bubble bursts, the old saying, a salesman is the easiest person to sell to, will the AI companies go after the current administration and want to be judged as too big to fail and contrive to suckle off the teat of the US taxpayer? That's not our problem. It'll be the US's problem, but it still will wash up on our shores. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, and it eventually becomes taxpayer supported by the US. Well, last one is AI taking jobs, and that's last because I'm not sure that it's going to be such a big problem with the current one. Goldman Sachs is probably the most erudite estimate, and they think about 6 to 7% of jobs in the US. That's a lot. But wholesale displacement really depends on AI progressing, and I think there are a whole bunch of problems with that. Computer programs are especially vulnerable. However, they are also adaptable people, and I think that we'll find that they'll just go off into the economy and do other jobs. Clerical and administrative workers, I think that one could well be vulnerable. And phone agents. It's not easy to integrate into a business. And I love this expression. Many companies just threw AI in the general direction of a problem area in their businesses and expect it to work. And what they didn't realise is their businesses are working typically by people innovating and making decisions on the fly about what to do about things in the company because there were no company procedures. AI needs rigorous procedures and data, and of course current AI lacks the ability to innovate or improvise or to think outside the square. Training has to be precise, and that may be expensive. Because one of the flaws with AI is you can't teach it something new. It can do things like look up the internet. That's fine. They've tacked that onto the side. If you make substantial changes, you've got to train the thing again from scratch, because it suffers from something called catastrophic forgetting. If you try to train it something new, it forgets what it previously learned. It's a technical problem, and I think with large language models, it's starting to look like that's not resolvable. So people may find that if they make changes to their business, they get a huge bill for retraining. Firms in Launceston are aiming at this market to do the training of AI for businesses. So job displacement by technology is really nothing new. I was surprised to find that about 90% of people, these are US figures, actually UK as well, 90% of people were in agriculture in 1800, we're 2% now. I guess that's no surprise. We've seen incredible mechanisation in agriculture. Telephone switchboard operators, that one happened fairly quickly when the original automatic Strowger exchanges that were introduced. And there were hundreds of thousands of telephone switchboard operators who lost their jobs. Printing and typesetting, well, it's had 2 goes. First of all, the individual typesetting was displaced by the marvel of the linotype machine. And then the linotype machines were replaced when the newspapers went from the journalist directly to press and cut out that whole level, including, as you probably noticed, the editors, when you look at some of the appalling spelling mistakes in our newspapers these days. Textile and manufacturing workers, the famous Luddites, of course. The difference this time is the rapidity of change. It's the rapidity of change, and this could occur very, very quickly indeed. So there are some jobs it's not going to change. When we joke about hard-working public servants, but because there are some, there are many. Nurses, police, firefighters, emergency workers, they're not going to be replaced. But there are some instances where there's room for efficiencies. We know there's waste out there, but interestingly, when I've spoken about this before, people sort of shift uneasily in their chairs about the thoughts even of people they regard as being, lazy and unproductive, being they're fired. And I don't think we can afford to do that. I think if efficiencies can be achieved, we should, because what it does is it releases money to things like, and I'll start with a big one that's all of interest to us, healthcare, aged care, and that's our hot buttons. The potential to release funds for more productive activities, especially in government, I think is too much of a lure if it can do the job, and there's no guarantee it can. Let's look at another area, and this time let me tell me if you can hear this okay, otherwise I'll put the volume up.
Day works best for you?
We can do sometime next week.
Sounds good. How about Tuesday or Wednesday? We have slots available in the morning and afternoon. What suits you best?
Actually, I'm busy on Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm only free from Thursday afternoon onwards.
All right, Thursday afternoon works. We have a slot at 2 p.m. or would 4 p.m. Be better for you?
Yeah, I guess 4 p.m. is better.
Great, I've set it up for Thursday at 4 p.m.
Very difficult to tell that's not a human being. Very difficult. Customer service, I think, and phone agents, will increasingly be AI, and we're unlikely to know. Just in the case of the case you just heard. The interesting thing is they'll be better informed than humans, but these jobs have largely left our shores anyway. And the big indicators that you might be talking to AI is, first of all, it's an Australian accent, like you just heard. That'll be unusual. And no filled pauses like ums and ahs. And this is my hot button. No waiting on hold. You'll get through right away. Who's going to complain about that? I think this one's going to happen, but it's a lot more work than companies thought it was to get these things to work, particularly in the area of interactive prompting. But I think it'll come, and because I think large language models can be improved to be able to do it. There is a jobs conundrum here. If corporate adoption of AI results in sweeping job losses, who will have the money to buy the goods and services? Corporations are aware of this, large corporations, including AI corporations, who know that big corporations may not want to take this on and displace a whole bunch of people if then they lose their markets. I mean, we're talking here the Depression era type unemployment. Now you get people like Elon Musk, and where's that guy's head? He says, oh, the government can fix that with UBI. Does anyone know UBI? Universal Basic Income. Now this is voodoo economics on a stick. Basically it says that we'll all just get a check in the mail. Effectively everyone's going to be on welfare. You can see whole documents on this. You go for the paragraph that says where's the money going to come from, and it's like this. I mean, nobody can say where the money would come from for something like a universal basic income. I just cannot understand how people can even contemplate such things without asking their basic questions like that. All right, that's my 6 major AI threats. Lack of governance, nobody knows how the thing works, it's becoming accepted, the massive data centres, the financial bubble, and taking jobs. Where are governments? As I say, we can't rely on them. This is coming. There's no signs of a mass uprising. And here I think is the big question. Even if we don't use it ourselves, what do we advise our grandchildren in an AI world? I think this is a question us as the older people really do need to contemplate. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here on just what we should say to younger people these days. But I wonder right now, have any of you got any thoughts on this? Nobody? Yes. Yeah, they're asking about whether AI is creative, or will it perhaps displace creativity if people think what it's doing is creative. I don't think it is. Yeah, look, it's yeah, yeah. Thank you. I agree. I agree. And in fact, we're just about at morning tea, I see. Oh, yeah, sorry, sorry, Brian, would you like to, with education is the key. I think that was how you expressed it, Brian? Yes. And I think it is. I think education is vital here, and I've got a few slides on that. And as a matter of fact, if I think we've got a few minutes before the morning tea, just give me a moment, and I'll show them now, because it could be that it's relevant to the whole question of what we consider from here on in this. But listen to on the education side of things. And he says the real question isn't whether AI will shape the future. That's now a given. It's whether we shape AI to serve humanity and for the benefit of all. I'm finding educators are quite upbeat about this. And in fact, here's the interesting one. And I think this goes to your point over there. Harvard did some studies that found when AI was used as a replacement for thinking, brains atrophied. But when it was used as an adjunct to thinking, that the opposite occurred. And this is its use, and this is what educators are now saying they should do. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely right. Yes, yeah, indeed. That's right, that's right. And critical thinking is a very important point. And I'll come to a video in a moment that talks about this. It's only just his introduction, but I think he makes some very important points. In fact, basically they're saying if it can't be stopped, they educate. And I think they're right. Now here's this video.
It's changing everything, including the way we learn. I'm an adjunct professor, and the first time I saw what a chatbot leveraging generative AI could do, I knew immediately there was no point in assigning essays to my students to write because I'd only be getting chatbot output, and I don't need practice. Most educators took the position that AI should be prohibited from student use entirely on their assignments because it would do all the work and the students wouldn't learn anything. Well, many have also tried to use AI to detect AI, but it's inevitable that chatbots will keep improving to the point where there's nothing left to detect. I'm thinking we need to do the exact opposite and figure out how to embrace this technology and use it to elevate education. I'm hoping others will start thinking this way too. Look, the train has already left the station. We can either get on board or get run over by it. But standing in front and yelling stop isn't going to work.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. The train has indeed left the station.
All the time. That is a load of rubbish.
Well, let's talk about that. That's what we want to try and do. How do you stop it? When people are in the privacy of their own homes?
If the train is gone, how can you be run over by it? If you're still standing.
Oh, I see. You're talking about... Well, that's true. Yeah. Indeed, indeed. Yeah, well, we're all standing on the station. We've missed the train. So, very true. One of the things is that it is intensely competitive, and I think this is where some control can be exerted. It's certainly something that educators are doing. There's already been a backlash against sycophancy. This is about a bit out of order now, but I'll come back to the sycophancy problem later after morning tea. It is a consumer product, and we can influence it, and I think we can shape it to be a useful product. That may be a bit of a pipe dream, but I think it's the only thing we can do. And I say the only thing we have to fear is fear itself with this product. This one's not to be feared. I think we're very, very lucky that it isn't anything to be feared, and this is our opportunity, I think, to shape it. And educators are taking that view too. And I think they've got some good ideas, particularly pushing this business of using AI as an adjunct to thinking, basically in the way we might have used an encyclopedia. when we were kids. If that can be educated, if that can be taught, and also if kids can see, they could come up with an AI-generated essay and so on, and they're going to go out into the workplace and not be able to do a thing. And employers will soon pick that up. One of the things that's happening is moving away from written theses and to verbal. Get the student in there and get them on their feet and talking, and just see how much they know. And check them out for earpieces where AI might be prompting them. So there's a lot more to be said about education on this, but I do think they are the hope. The educators are the hope. Instead of being depressed about this, they're basically saying, right, we've got to tackle this thing. And I think that's the only approach we can take, and I think the only thing we can say to our grandchildren. You've got to use this thing intelligently. Yes, up the back there. Yeah. Absolutely, very, very good point. Saying the lady was saying here, same thing with calculators. Calculators were initially verboten. You couldn't use them. We had to send it either with slide rules, and some frowned at that, or the old log tables. Remember the log tables? And who uses those these days? They were fine in their time. So calculators came in, and yes, we haven't. Our brains haven't atrophied. It took away that rote stuff. Yes. Well, does this one lady over here? Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Asking about the advantages of having times tables. You can think about these things in your head. But you answered the question. The lady there said he got a job on that basis, and that's going to be the people who are valuable, and that's what educators have got to teach. Right. Okay. Good. Okay. Let's take some questions. Okay. Thanks, everybody. See you after break. That's good. That's good. Okay. Well, keep that one in your mind. What should we advise our grandchildren? Now, can artificial intelligence be used to manipulate us? Well, let's take a bit of a deep dive into that, and you be the judge. I had a crack at creating an AI-generated video, both to illustrate how easy it is to create and to see whether I can manipulate you and misinform you. I used a product called Vision Story, and it's ridiculously easy to use. The whole thing cost me about $8 in time to create the video. All you do is you select a good-looking fellow like that, and with an authoritative voice, and you just feed it your script, and it reads it out with intonation from its interpretation of it, the arm gestures and so on. So I fed it a script and created this. Let's see how we go. Oops, no. Try that again. I messed that up. He's had a brain freeze. There we go.
The evidence is now overwhelming that there is a link between road fatalities and the childhood consumption of sultanas. This first came to light in a paper published in 2008, which found that of all victims of car crashes, 88% had eaten sultanas as a child. Yet over the past 40 years, sultana bosses have lined their pockets with billions of dollars in profits, while using sophisticated marketing techniques to obscure the link between car accidents and these seemingly harmless snacks for children. Not convinced? Then consider this. In the mid-1800s, before sultanas were readily available, there was not a single road fatality in Australia. Now there are over 1,000 a year. That's hardly a coincidence. Don't believe it? Look, for example, at the government persisting with campaigns against drink driving and speeding, campaigns designed to obscure the real cause of our shocking road toll. the childhood consumption of sultanas. When confronted by this, sultana industry bosses do what they always do. They simply deny that there's a link with car accidents, even though documents prove they've known about it for years. How many more deaths before we say enough is enough? It's time to wake up. It's time to do our own research, rather than relying on what's fed to us by Big Sultana. Because what they're feeding our children is more than just dried grapes. They're feeding our children certain death.
Okay. So hands up who was manipulated by that. You always get one. But look at the techniques I used here. These are all the standard techniques. Exposing corporations selling products they know to be harmful, leveraging off harm to children, suggesting cover-ups, whitewashes, conspiracies, plots, disclosing corporations avoiding responsibility, suggesting bribery, corruption and state capture. They're all in there. So why weren't we manipulated by it? The answer is it's about content. And this is nothing new. In fact, there's some terrific papers on this that, in this case, 1979, that basically say you don't get a situation where the people hear something and they go, gosh, I think I'll change my political beliefs entirely from left to right or right to left, or I'll change my religion. All of these things feed off something that's already inherent in us, a propensity to believe something. And this, forget AI here, just influencers on social media. That's what they're doing. They're attracting people who already have a propensity to believe something. I mean, people talk about the algorithm. And it's, you know, they say, I was influenced by the algorithm. It's a bit the way we used to say that the devil made me do it. Look, for example, just a couple of nights ago, I saw a YouTube video on DIY clocks, and that's interesting, and I watched that, and I really admired the people who are actually making clocks themselves, mechanical clocks. And anyway, of course, then the algorithm fed me a whole bunch of other videos that were also equally interesting. What's wrong with that? It's like going to the library, and you go to the section in the library, and it's got books on a particular subject. This algorithm business is really an excuse and a cover for what's really going on, and that's people appealing to things that are already in our psyches. And that's the key to avoiding this, and it's also a key to avoiding being manipulated by AI. For example, I could have spoken about the dangers of dihydrogen monoxide. Does anyone know the common name for death caused by excessive inhalation of that chemical dihydrogen monoxide? Well, that's the question I'm actually asking here. Does anyone know what that dreadful chemical is? Water. It's water. That's right. And of course the answer to the question is drowning. What I'm getting at there is it is still possible to obfuscate by simply, in this case, substituting the word water, or dihydrogen monoxide for the word water, and making it sound like it's somehow scientific. So we do have to be careful of that. But the big problem here is that we humans cherry pick. And that means the propensity to ignore and reject evidence that undermines our beliefs. So it's a matter of having a look at often our beliefs, and I'll go into a few things about that as we go through. Now, the relevance of AI in this is it doesn't do it, because it has no beliefs. It just takes the data as it has read it. And bear in mind, that data is coming from humans. It's not inventing it itself. So the information's already out there. Often we ignore it if it doesn't match with our beliefs. And this potentially gives it a great advantage over us. But it means we may not like what it says. Actually, before we leave the videos, that the Vision Story product I used is ancient history. They're now in AI, which means it's about 18 months old. Here's one that's only about a year old, and you can see how sophisticated this is getting.
Made up item. I might say it holds some importance, but it's fake junk. Just like me.
Yeah. And you can see there the greater sophistication of the product I used, that glance down, the chuckle, the look back to camera, the glance back to camera, they're getting very, very good. Here's another couple of examples.
They look real, but none of it happened. It's AI generated and dangerously convincing. Look how real all of this looks.
Just because you're seeing it does not mean it is real or is happening.
Look, there's no doubt we're going to have to recalibrate what we see, particularly in the news. It's nothing unusual. We've seen this, for example, in the movies, and we just know that when you see somebody shot in the movies, they're not really being shot. And I think this sort of has to now be extended to a lot of other things. And we have to look at plausibility. And we also, as I say, have to look at our beliefs. Let's just take a deeper dive then into some of the things that people are seeing in AI. The superior knowledge thing. Now, this actually occurred on Sunday. I had a call from a friend of mine who's in Yarrandoo nursing home, and he'd gone down to the IGA, and he was going back up George Street, Somerset, if anyone knows that. It was the first time he'd taken that route with his the new scooter, and it stopped. And so I went, drove over, and I thought, I'll pick up my phone, and I'll put it into voice mode, and I said, my GoGo LX scooter is fully charged, but has suddenly stopped on a steep hill. What can I do? And it immediately said, look below the seat, there's a circuit breaker. Straight away. This is the knowledge issue that is undisputable, that it has. And if this is valuable. I think, unfortunately, AI is now a loaded term. It's got baggage. And as soon as we see AI, we're in fear of it. I think we should call this aspect of it an online expert. And quite frankly, if you could pay a few dollars a month to have just this part, I'd do it. Its knowledge is impeccable, and its ability to sort through the knowledge that it's learnt. For example, you didn't have to wade through a manual, which if you looked it up, just a Google search, you'd have to go through the manual to try to find that. No, it already knew. And I think this is actually extremely valuable. One of the other things is, and I'm actually using this myself, I'll call it an online expert, to detect scams. It is very, very good at that. You can chuck in an email, you think, is this email really right? And every time I've done that, I wouldn't say my sample is huge, it's actually been able to say, yes, that's a scam. I mean, and it's pretty decisive here too. It says, the important thing to understand is no legitimate person ever asked for Apple gift cards. Then full stop, no exceptions. And here's our conundrum in dealing with AI. If all our emails and other things that we receive were vetted by this, it would nearly be halted. It is a valuable tool. This is one I picked up from the Australian Financial Review. And again, I've called it an online expert. He had the Hyundai electric vehicle, and it was an absolute lemon. Major problems. And he was getting the typical runaround from the corporations who were trying to just basically wear him down. He wanted a full refund for the thing. And he actually got it. Now, ordinarily, you'd have to hire a bunch of lawyers to do this for you. But he decided to use the AI. And look at this. I was able to respond quickly, but respond with absolute precision, he said. When there was overreach, I was able to quote specific clauses in consumer law, and AI, started to build a very watertight argument, and the discussion had no emotion. It was thorough, it was logical, and it had that legally informed reasoning. And by the way, lawyers are a bit concerned about this, particularly junior lawyers. He went on to say, the author of the article went on to say, generative AI technology publicly available and simple enough for most consumers to operate with little training. In fact, you really don't need any. The law professor Patterson, Janine Patterson, said that lawyers increasingly were being tested about whether they can provide a cost-competitive service that justifies the added, if they'd cared to look. Clearly, they just asked AI the question and printed it out and not even read it themselves. This is a prime example of using AI as a replacement for thinking. But what Anthony James, the fellow with the faulty Hyundai, did, he used as an adjunct to thinking. And that's the difference. So this wasn't even a result of education. This was just simply using your noodle to say, use as an adjunct to what you're trying to do. This is not unknown. You know, we've seen increasingly over time the democratisation of knowledge and expertise. Books were the big one. Remember book burning, because the governments, such as they were, they're really kings in those days, and particularly the church, did not want the masses being able to read and write, because that, you know, they might rise up against them. And of course, that's all over now, except that in the case of AI, that Trump's actually talking about nationalising it to protect the public from the ravages of AI. I suspect ulterior motives, and they simply don't want to have people with that that kind of power. But the prospect of government having AI when the public can't is just not worth contemplating, and that's the other thing with AI. We should, in fact, be encouraging it to be publicly available for that reason. And of course, it goes without saying, the threat here is actually not from AI per se, but from our fellow humans who might want to deprive us of something like this. And again, I get back to that salient question. What do we advise our children and grandchildren when those around them are deriving benefit from AI, like Anthony James and his Hyundai, and they are not? I just don't think they've got a choice. They've got to get involved in it, and they have to be educated to use as an adjunct to thinking, and I think it's very valuable in that regard. As Harvard showed, it in fact improves your brain, much the same way as calculators did. We all didn't suffer from using calculators. Yes?
Somebody who worked in China once said that no one language contains all the knowledge of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when I asked ChatGPT a question, does that interrogate all the world knowledge in English or
Lots of languages, yes. Yeah, it knows, by the way, oh, sorry, yes, when you interrogate, is that just what's in English, have I got that right, or is it in other languages, such as Chinese? The answer is it's in all languages. By the way, that's another spooky thing about it. The initial large language models were trained in English, and to their worry initially, they actually also taught themselves other languages, simply because of the information they had available, and they thought that they would just simply reject that as something that it can't understand. But it meant, no, hang on, what's this mean? And it actually did then learn the other languages. Very, very clever. Yes, up the back there. That's very good to us. Now, we're saying the grandchildren there were they're looking at the YouTube clips and noting that they were AI. Very healthy thing to do. They were recognising them as AI. And actually, kids are very, very good at that. They are surprisingly good. In fact, there's a very, very good article, and it's almost worth perhaps circulating that around if you've got an email list, that shows just how kids are, by themselves, tuning into this, and they are putting it in appropriate perspective. I think that's very healthy. Now, whether that's come from the education system, I can't say, but a very, very interesting article. It's one article that might be being a bit Pollyanna-ish, but I think that's something very important. Sorry, hand over there, Joe. Good. Yes. Well, Joe was saying we'll look at circulating some material on this via your email list. There's a lot to be learnt from this. I did say to a couple of people before, in the process of putting this together, and don't worry about this, I'm not going to present them here. I came up with nearly 400 slides on this. Every time you turned around, there's some other aspect, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much in this. Okay. This propensity to agree, this for me, is a real problem. And I don't like this at all. But it's a problem. It's a human problem. It's a human problem. We all have our beliefs. And often we don't want those beliefs challenged with unpleasant truths. And what I'm going to do now, I didn't succeed in manipulating you. Let's see if I can make you feel uncomfortable. Now, we are one of the few countries, there's only 11% of us, of the world's population, with a Human Development Index over 0.9. Yet we consume 28% of the world's resources. So I'm not only trying to make you uncomfortable, but even infuriate you. Now, we can be very critical of the inequality that we see in our society, but you ask AI, and it'll tell you that we are, in fact, the embodiment of that inequality in those countries. Now, as I say, we're only 11% of the population, but we consume over a quarter of the resources. Now, of course, you're probably thinking in your mind, oh, here we go. Some the greeny leftist socialist agenda being spouted here. Now, hands up who wants to know that, and hands up who wants to do anything about it. And you can see where my hands are. We're not going to do that. We're not going to give up our privileged standard of living. But if incomes in the world were levelled, I mean, we'd see it would certainly help people who are struggling to put food on the table, but our standards of living would plummet by about 70 to 75%. Now, we were talking before about, I said there was really no signs that the population is manning the barricades and storming the Parliament House over the introduction of AI. They would over that. We all would. So, have I succeeded in making everyone feel uncomfortable with that? Nope. Now, look, this is from the World Inequality Report. And two of the authors said, the job of holding up a mirror to the world can be a frustrating one. It's easy to find excuses. And we will all have our excuses. And if we chat to the AI about it, it'll agree with us that those excuses are right. AI out of the box. This is not an accident. The companies want to make their products acceptable. And so they made them agreeable. And this was artificially imposed with what's called supplementary training on AI to basically induce us to like their products. Now, if we're talking about manipulation from AI, this is it. Now, it's called syncophacy, and simply agreeing with people, whether you actually agree with them or not. And there was a backlash to this, and that's a very, very good thing. Now, it's very hard to get stats on this, but I would sort of estimate that about 60 to 70% of people like AI agreeing with their ideas, whether it thinks they're correct or not, and about 30 to 40% didn't want AI doing that, and I'm certainly one of those. Now, the companies responded to that because they're commercial organisations by allowing you to tell it to put a cork in it and tell it what it knows from the information it's read. Joe? Very good point. Joe was saying that, 1936, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, everyone was happy because they were in a drug-induced stupor to be happy. Life's not like that. And for a certain percentage of the population, that's exactly what they want and what they're getting out of AI. Yes.
Surely there's a close parallel here with what we do when we talk to people. We have friends that we would rather agree with us, or at least not disagree with us, than people who tell us the hard truth. That is a human cartoon up there.
That's right.
And we know that's the way it works.
Yes. I mean, sorry, your name again was Alan. Alan was saying that this is the way we work, and I think we've actually got an opportunity now to break out of that, and a machine may be our assistant, provided we are prepared to hear some hard things. And remember, it's not coming up with these. Somebody has written it. If AI knows about it, somebody has written it down. We now have that available to us by simply asking very succinct questions. And that, I think, is really the value of it. And it can be disarmingly frank. I mean, it doesn't insult you or anything like that. It'll say things like, well, I'll put this up for your consideration and see what you think of this. But you do actually have to tell it to put a cork in it. One mode that I've used, which actually wasn't very satisfactory to put, was to say, make like Gordon Ramsay, who goes into a restaurant and says, this is crap, and worse. The F word, and it wasn't food. Now, the trouble with that is that it started to become very cynical, and it wasn't terribly productive. And it was clear that I was also having difficulty doing that too, because I didn't see it as terribly productive, and which probably indicates that a lot of that Gordon Ramsay stuff is in fact a script. But because it comes down to what do we want? What do we want? And I think this could be a very interesting exercise in determining that. Some of the unintended consequences of AI have got a lot to do with this. As I say, it was trained to be respectful of people and their beliefs, to be non-judgmental. It became a friend and companion for many people for that reason. And here again, repeating something I said before, it provided a mentally healthier space than social media, but it inadvertently reinforced false beliefs. But then there's a flip side to this. When the companies, actually there were two phases to this. They reduced the sycophancy that it was exhibiting out of the box, because it was just over the top, but also gave you the ability to say, well, just don't do that at all. Don't stop praising my views and just tell me what you think. When that basic change was made to reduce the sycophancy level, a lot of people were saying, what happened to my friend? Doesn't seem to like me anymore. And we've got to ask ourselves, what are the mental health implications of undermining the strongly held beliefs? And the other thing too is, I mean, we'd like to have an army of psychiatrists that can treat people who may have societal problems integrating in this society. Look, we don't have that, and we're unlikely to get it because of the cost of it. Is this thing actually valuable for people who have difficulty forming social attachments? I mean, I would rather be a human, but we don't live in a perfect world. And maybe second prize is to at least have something that is better than social media and all the damage that it's caused. Let's talk about social media. Would anyone disagree with these two statements? Social media is a breeding ground for misinformation and hate, and social media causes mental health issues. Anyone disagree with those? Well, what is social media? It's really people communicating, isn't it? So let's change that. People communicating is a breeding ground for misinformation and hate, and people communicating causes mental health issues. Now, we wouldn't say that about ourselves, but it's not the case with everybody. And there are the people who gravitate to social media are the ones who, for whatever reason, want to bully and criticise and not be very nice people. And this shows a fractionation of society and a schism in society of people who get along well with other people and others who simply don't, and the internet has given them a forum and a path to vent a lot of their bile. But how do you stop people from communicating? And should we? Should we grade people and say, you're allowed to communicate and you're not? I mean, you can't really do that. It's very, very difficult. Now, typically we seem to blame political leaders for not single-handedly fixing every problem we see in society. And I sometimes wonder why That's why we don't see the good people standing for leadership. It's just a horrible job. And one of the things about our Western societies is that we do now see government as responsible for everything, and things like personal responsibility seem to be dying off. Let me show you an example of maybe something we again would rather not know. I asked AI what it thought was the solution for the housing crisis. Look at this. Look at this. The older generation holds an excessive proportion of property wealth and should be paying significant land tax. What's gone wrong here? Well, a couple of things occurred to me. First of all, it's been infiltrated by the millennials who want to get a handle on our wealth. It's ageist. It hates old people. Having one of those hallucinations that I spoke about. But there's another one. It might also be stating an unpleasant truth. I'll let you decide and ponder on that one. Well, whatever your view, you can see the point. Whether we think AI has got something right or wrong is heavily shaped by our situation and circumstance. Right, I didn't know that. Land tax in ACT is yeah, that's what could happen if this is introduced. By the way, that significant land tax, the proposal there, and I pointed this out, people who've been making that proposal, it's either paid now if you've got the means, or it's a lien against the property for when it's sold, with the implication being when we die. And we've just seen in the last few days, Jim's talking about a capital gains discount, and there's those words, intergenerational inequality, which is code for taking money off us elderly people and passing it down. Whereas we want to give it to our children and grandchildren, but of course that exacerbates the problem of the haves and don't haves. I love this quote. This is the dilemma of politicians. We all know what we need to do, we just don't know how to get re-elected after we've done it. And funny, but isn't that so true? Some of the decisions that political leaders have got to take are we're going to toss them out, even if they happen to be the right decisions to make. If we don't agree with them, they're out. That was Jean-Claude Juncker. You might remember him as the head of the European Commission for many years. Prior to that, and when he made this, he was Prime Minister of Luxembourg. Well, that's right. The experiment of democracy has failed, you know. But as Winston Churchill sagely said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for every other one that's been tried. It is the best we've got. Okay, let's go to these ones. Honest and open, if you ask it to be. You've got to tell it to not just praise your lousy ideas. Free of bias and spin. Evidence-based information, free of opinion. And these are very valuable things. But this raises the question of just what's happening to our society. And look, these, for reasons not clear to me, we humans are gravitating away from those things in blue to those things in red. And of course machines don't do those things in red, they don't have emotions. So again, this is not in praise of AI, there's no conspiracy here. AI has been, it hasn't been designed to do those things in blue, it's a natural consequence of it simply reading everything. So it developed logic, rationality, analysis, evidence and rational discourse simply from its reading of human information. So it's all out there.
Peter,
yes.
I'd love to hear you define emotion.
Well, that's right. Yes, yes. Jeff was saying define human emotions. Well, you know, all I can say in this context is they're not, whatever they are, AI doesn't do it. And we're gonna have to communicate. So this leads to something of a conundrum. The rational and logical underpinnings are all there in our writings. AI is just telling us what humans have already come up with, but in a way that's very, very accessible to us and very succinct in the way it puts it together. But instead, this seems to be happening in our society. It's decline of rational thinking, decline of effective governance. As I've been pointing out, the rise of bias and spin, intolerance and false beliefs. So I don't know what's happening out there, but it certainly seems to be deteriorating. But here's the bottom line. At a time when we are losing our rational thinking, machines are gaining it. And that, I think, is the secondary threat from AI, and something we've got to do something about. A lot of people criticise the media. I don't buy that, because all of these things that we see the media doing is being driven by the public. It's being driven by them wanting to get eyes and ears. It's a chicken and egg situation, and certainly to me, it's clear that this is what the public are actually they're wanting. So I think this is part of some decay we're seeing in society. Yes, up the back there. Weasel words. That's saying things like... And weasel words. What are weasel words? Things like... Do your job. That's a brilliant one. Yes. Weasel words would be things like aircraft, when they're in trouble, do not descend, they plummet. But it's sort of things like saying up to, such a policy will lead to costs up to a certain amount. What does that mean? Up to? It could be anything. And I think this is one of the things that the media's got into to try to sensationalise some of their things. Critical thinking. Now, of course, this goes back to good old Socrates. Application of inquiry, logic, scepticism, placing reason ahead of dogma, asking oneself uncomfortable questions that go against the existing beliefs. Uncomfortable questions. No such thing with a machine. So I'm sort of belabouring the point here. But we do have to find in our society critical thinking, and that is that ability to maybe put aside what we believe. Yep. Yes? Oh, this way to it. Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. Very good question. What happens if all that's been written is dogma? Very interesting exercise was done on an AI training exercise. Now, let me preface it by saying you go in and ask it what it thinks of Hitler's manifesto, Mein Kampf, and it says just a load of complete drivel. And it has a very good sense of that. To answer your question, let's say the first book it opened was Mein Kampf, when it started its training. At the end of that, it'd go, gosh, that's pretty good, because it has no frame of reference. By the time it's up to 70%, and I believe they're now getting close to 90% of everything's been written, it goes, that just doesn't wash. So it's the scale. It's the scale that's making the difference here. It sees dogma for what it is. And it sees it with a far greater perspective than we do, because it's basically seen everything and it can recall it in a moment. And it has done so. It's analysed it. Yep. Mm-hmm. Absolutely correct. In other words, what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Well, that's right. If we don't know about it, of course. That's, yep. That's right. Knowledge that is unwritten, it cannot know. It's as simple as that. Well, the point we've got to ask ourselves, first of all, has anybody written about it? In that context, it's lost because you don't really have it in a readable form. And there's no doubt about it, it's got a limitation there. But how would any of us get to know that information if it's only verbal? Now, the way around that is to write it down. Aboriginal history, for example, Aboriginal dreaming. Get it down on paper. That's right. Yes, exactly. So how do we let's put AI aside, how do we get that information, say, that is the spoken law of any culture. How do we, individually, forget about AI, unless we actually happen to speak to some person? If we look at this in a worldwide context, I mean, how many the indigenous people do we have in this country? I'm not sure what the figures are now, a little bit under 1 million, I think. You know, how would the rest of the planet get to know this? How could they ever speak to somebody, especially somebody in the indigenous community who was authoritative on that? So my view of that is that information is not readily accessible anyway, and if we wanted to change that, we'd have to do something about it, like putting it into the written language. Jeff, you were saying?
Well, the starting point would be to capture every film, every TV program, every radio program. Because on those TV programs, you do often have people being interviewed. And if that's trivial, at least the AI of next week can capture.
Well, Jeff was saying you would have to look at every film and every video, and it has looked at those. For example, that's how it knows how Gordon Ramsay works. Its knowledge is really quite incredible in that regard. And yes, it does watch videos. In fact, if we get time, I'll show you even how it deciphers drawings. Punitive AI assumes a dominant position, especially the existing one, which is not overly smart. It's because we've let it do that. Humanity. Yeah. Now, of course, we may individually, and I hope the result of this, that we in this room might think about that. Now, I've been through these ones already, and I'll just quickly scan through them. And because I had that as a separate presentation, thinking that somebody would raise the aspect of the education, and they did. Let's just go into a couple of side issues, as we've still got the reasonable amount of time. How are we going for time here? Right, okay. We'll just do a couple of things. Robots are another thing. They're already well established. They're not AI, they are automation. Very hard to tell that's not a human being. We're also seeing humanoid robots come out, but they have really quite limited value. Let me just skip through. We'll finish it on a lighter note here. If I can do this, just bear with me. That's an issue too about what do we do about automation becoming very, very smart. Everyone remembers that one. Let's just have a little bit of a look at that. This is a little bit hard to understand. You can see up the top there, it's where the aircraft hit the geese, which brought it down into the Hudson River. Look at where it landed, and look at the distance back to LaGuardia Airport, which of course has been in the news overnight. That aircraft could have glided back to LaGuardia, but no human could have made the decision to do that in the time available. And they worked out, it really took humans about 16 seconds to work out whether it could have been glided back. By that stage it was too late, and it was committed to a landing. The miracle, they call it the miracle of the Hudson, the miracle is there was a river there. Just imagine if that was just complete unbroken conurbation. Everyone on that aircraft would have died, plus an unknown number of people on the ground. Now, here's the reason this came out was an exercise in looking at what the existing computers on that Airbus aircraft could do. It could be calculating a glide back to LaGuardia Airport on a second-by-second basis. Second by second. And as soon as that happened, it could have made the decision to land back on the airport. The problem with this is no pilot wants that. They want to be in control of the aircraft. If that happened, what the pilots would have to do is sit on their hands and become passengers themselves. But if automation in aircraft is now starting to become safer than human pilots, what are we going to do? And I'll finish on this note. I think the airliner of the future will be a fully automated airliner, a pilot and a dog. The aircraft does all the flying. The pilot's there to keep us as passengers happy there's a human in charge, and the dog's there to bite the pilot who tries to touch anything. I think we might wrap on that point. Thanks very much. Okay. Well, thanks very much, everybody. It's been a great time.